I have to say, I actually kind of feel excited now to hear this story.
Oh,
I think the people like Revilo Oliver are like, these are the people that we...
He's been here since he's been with us since the beginning.
I believe you may have introduced us to Revilo in our John Birch episodes.
I think he came even
50s.
before that.
Really?
I remember very early on in the naive days of early 10 when I was like, this guy's name is the Oliver backwards.
Yes. You know what? We might even... I think we probably mentioned him in one of the first episodes because one of David Maitz's books was published together with his book in the same volume.
Yes. No, I know it was very, very early. Yeah. Like it was some of our first episodes. Yeah. So I'm saying he's been with us since the beginning.
Yeah. It was Revilo Oliver and David Maitz's in the same volume, published in America. Maybe by Revilo Oliver himself, I'm not sure. Or some group of
It's possible. Depends on the book. Was it his one of his white nationalist texts or one of his Satanist texts?
It was, I think, a David Maitz text.
Yeah, it's possible. Then.
And it was about a galactic imperium.
Well,
okay. I think we'll learn about Revilo's love of the Yak a little earlier, and we know that Davy loved to yak around too.
They're all jocking the yak.
He spanglered.
They spanglered the yak.
Yeah, they spanglered their yaks
Spangling his yak.
And that's very likely. So I don't know. We'll have to check that out. But let me start the episode by saying. Welcome to the Empire Never Ended with Boris, Fritz, and Ray.
Yo, hey.
The Empire of the Communists is everywhere. Truly, 50 to 60% of America has now been taken by the communists. It's being taken by them.
Well, yeah, Hawaii, as we know...
Fluoride in the water is turning your kids into...
Mandrake, have you ever seen a communist drink a glass of water?
Well, we're talking about Revilo P. Revilo P.
I think
Oliver.
I'm looking now. I'm sorry about.
It's okay. You're just breaking my rhythm. That's all. I don't have any.
I think it was the book. The book was Vindex, and it was and it was, I think, possibly published by Liberty Bell.
That would be crazy if that's true. That's worth interrupting anything. You just figure that out.
Liberty Bell, Vindex. Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. All right.
Yes. It was, by Revilo P. Oliver, 1983, my Vindex, that PDF. Hold on.
Yes. It's you see, like it's the front page, it says Vindex.
I do.
And then it says below, also in the issue, postscripts by Revilo P. Oliver.
Oh, he did an analysis of it.
Yeah, this is 84.
Wow. Well, okay.
Or maybe, I don't know if is it about that?
Oh, guys, I think we have a Patreon episode.
I think so. Yeah, we'll read his Erlich.
I think we already did an episode on this, but we read Vindex.
Vindex was just part of our general study of Maitz's opus.
Okay.
We didn't. I think that might have been then when we first heard this dude's name.
Yeah, look,
we probably thought it was fake. That's crazy. Yeah. That's crazy. All right. Well, how about that? So we're talking about a guy who we first figured out was a guy because he published notes on Vindex and Vindex. David Maitz's Galactic
he's also the
Imperium
connection between David Maitz and the John Birch Society.
That's great.
Which is useful for a future quiz show.
That's true. Yes. That is true.
Because we may have gotten that wrong on a previous quiz show because we had the whole everybody was a Bircher.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think we thought David Maitz did not have a Bircher connection.
Yeah.
However, Revilo P. Oliver is a clear connection to the John Birch Society.
We may need a quiz show soon. Actually, I'm forgetting a lot.
Yeah.
Might be a good excuse to study a little bit.
Pop quiz, hot shot.
Yeah. Damn. All right. So here we go. Revilo P. Oliver. All right, this guy.
He is one of the best names. I mean, this is really proper Tenenbaum stuff.
Yes.
Well, he's a freak. He has a name that doesn't sound real.
And it is real.
It is real. That is his God-given name.
Well, P is for Pendleton, right? So.
P is for Pendleton, not palindrome. Very good. Very good. Yeah. Great. We're already practicing for the quiz. Yes. Yeah. All right. So Revilo, Pendleton, Oliver. He did say that his crazy name was a name given to the firstborn sons of 6 generations past. Probably not true. The only guy that I found that did some genuine digging around Revilo's early life found that it's just his dad. It's only him and his dad. That's it. But there are interesting things about his family. But first, who is Revilo and why are we looking at him? Revilo is a progenitor of some of America's greatest ideas. If he didn't invent them, he added his special flavor to them and really, really brought us home and taught us all about the communist conspiracy, what communism is, and how it's actually a Jewish conspiracy. Yeah.
So he's the one that took the John Birch Society stuff into proper anti-Semitism.
Yeah, he's the first, I think he might be the first of our guys that was too right for John Birch. Although Drašković, I think, beat him by 2 days. Like the Slobodan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Slobodan Drašković quit the John Birch Society 2 days before Revilo did and completely stole his thunder.
Yeah, we mentioned Slobodan Drašković when we talked about neo-Chetnik terrorist organizations in the 60s and 70s because he was basically one of their idols and ideologues. So a Serbian right-winger who lived in America, had a father who was assassinated by a revolutionary group in 1921, the father was the minister of police in Yugoslavia, and this made him a lifelong anti-communist. A classical kind of paranoid anti-communist guy in America who basically, he was a kind of a merger of Serbian and Yugoslav anti-communism and American-style John Birch.
And he gave cred to the Birchers as a guy who has, been persecuted by the communists.
Yes.
And for more in-depth look on that, go back to episode 149, where we talked.
There we go. Thank
Drašković, Bircherism with Serbian characteristics.
Yeah. And for the John Birch stuff.
Which is a Patreon episode, I think.
The 50s.
Yeah. So, and Drašković is for our quiz. He's the connection between Chetniks and neo-Chetnik terrorists and the John Birch Society.
There you go. That's at least a 250 pointer right there. Well,
and he was also like Revilo Oliver. He was too right wing for the John Birch Society.
Yeah,
and Drašković was a one-time guest on the Buckley show, whatever the name.
Well, that makes sense.
That's right. Yeah.
There's a very strong Buckley connection to all this. That'd be William F. Buckley.
Yeah,
not Junior, regular. So,
what was the F for?
Fuck him.
Yeah.
Revilo P.
William Fuck.
William Fuck Buckley. That's my name.
Staying classy today.
My name's Buck. Childhood. Revilo P. Oliver's childhood.
So he had a happy childhood with that name? Did he?
Oh, not just with that name, with his whole childhood. Revilo P. Oliver's.
Was he rich? He went to a private school for sure.
Do you guys want me to tell this story?
Okay. Yes, go ahead. Good.
We're
interrupting.
I'm too excited to hear this story.
I know you're very excited.
We're excited.
Just tell me, was he rich? Was he rich?
We have heat stroke. Yeah.
Okay, so this answers a lot of these questions, actually. Revilo P. Oliver's granddad was named Franklin, and Franklin had 3 wives in his life, totaling 9 children between them, all ending in divorces. Franklin once had an article written about him in the local newspaper in fucking 79, maybe the guy died at 94. So this newspaper article comes out when he's 89 or something. And it's called Old But Frisky. And it's about this local rich old guy who owns a lot of valuable property and has many families and is just always on the arm of some young woman around town.
So a horny old guy.
He's a horny old legend.
In 1870.
In Illinois. Yeah. And he was also supposedly, this man, quote, the first white settler in what is now Chatsworth, Illinois, in Livingston County. So that's his granddad. These families now, the last wife of this man, Franklin, was Revilo's grandmother, and Revilo's father, whose name was Revilo, the first of the Revilos as far as we know, had a very, you can imagine, horrible childhood, not just because his this legal battle that would now erupt between the three families after this man dies, after Franklin dies, is very public. It's very brutal and vicious. There's a lot of also abuse within the family, like maternal and also abuse from Franklin. And Revilo is fucked up. And so is his brother, John. John and Franklin, later becoming the title of the John Franklin letters that Revilo would write, which is the predecessor to the Turner Diaries. So just so we know where those names come from, it's his dad's brother and his granddad. So this family is fucking falling apart, and it's terrible, and it's all in public. And there's like news articles about how brutal it is.
Okay. This is before he's born? Or?
This is before he's born. So Revilo,
the elder
senior, Revilo Senior, marries this woman who, on the day after all the papers are signed, she runs off with a shit ton of his money.
When
and
is this?
Some legal rights to his property. This is in like 1905, 06, something like that. Revilo's born in 1908. Okay. So we're coming up to that point. Then this Revilo starts to write poetry around this. And Revilo Senior starts to write poetry. A review of this poetry says this. This poetry of Revilo's is of the variety which makes its readers wish they had never been born. After reading a stanza or two, it is considered best to eat Limburger cheese to sweeten the breath and remove the yellow taste. So he was not only a poet, but a famously bad one. And he finally marries Revilo's Jr.'s mother because he wanted to find a woman that could put his poetry to song. And that was her. So they have what might have been an okay marriage had the other families of Franklin not jumped in at this moment and said, we're not going to give you any more of this inheritance because you gave it all to that woman that ran off with our inheritance. And now you're married to this other lady, and I've got private detectives who say that she's part of the same gang. And so they were able to block now Revilo Jr.'s immediate family, that is Revilo Sr. and Revilo Jr.'s mother, from getting any more inheritance. And when Revilo Jr.'s father dies, I'll tell you about this in a second, none of that money ends up with Revilo Jr.'s mother or Revilo. So he actually comes from a line with money and property. Actually, his granddad was mayor for a while, you know?
What is their ethnicity? What kind of a last name is Oliver?
Well, he was the first white settler, and I guess white. Yeah. So
they sound very waspy, but Oliver confuses me as last name. But
yeah, I don't know. His takes on religion are also going to be a little loosey goosey too later on. But anyway, that's what Revilo Jr., Revilo P. Oliver Pendleton, our boy, was born into here. So just I'll back up a little bit in a second. But in 1929, when Revilo is, I think, 21 years old, his father hangs himself, finally putting an end to this whole legal battle. He's found before crying on the street, wringing his hands on a corner, telling police officers that they are after him, whoever they might be.
We know who they are.
We do know who they are. The communists. Well, it starts there anyway. So that's what he comes into. Revilo himself spent a lot of time outside of the house in boarding school, studying classical languages as a child. He was very good at this. But he was also a very awkward kid and fucked up and easy prey for bullies at these boarding schools. He would always wear the same too tight, too small brown suit all the time.
And he was called Revilo Oliver.
And his name was a palindrome. And he would put his head down and charge his way across the campus to get to class. All through when he was in primary school, all the way through college. He was this kind of like shut in, scared kind of nerd guy who was also, sadly, extremely famously gullible, which is a very, it'll come up later. But, so he was always being told, they would prank him constantly. And with the saddest, meanest pranks, it would be like, hey, Revilo, you've got a telegram. Somebody wants to talk to you. And he would run to the telegram office. And of course, nobody wants to talk to him. He doesn't have any friends. Lock him in a room. His parents don't talk to him. Like, no one talks to him. It's very sad. So they would do this all the time to him. Yeah. And he would continuously fall for it.
Which is that kind of a thing is probably the other side of kind of conspiratorial thinking. Is like when you find out that people are lying to you, then you're like, everything is a lie.
Sure. Yeah. So Revilo does well in the classics, but there's a moment. This is interesting. Revilo is actually when you see his birth date in most texts, it registers him as being born in Corpus Christi, Texas. But everything else about his life is in Illinois. But the reason is because when he was born kind of, they were kind of escaping the family. Like his mom and his dad were escaped Illinois for a while and settled in Texas for like a minute. But it wasn't in Corpus Christi. It was in this tiny fucking little village called Iowa Park, which is nothing. It's like right on the Oklahoma border. Now it's like a town, but at the time, I mean, it barely existed. But he was born in like nowhere, like on the Texas-Oklahoma border, which I don't know, to me adds something to him, because the thing is he's extremely influential, extraordinarily influential in the American fascist scene, but he himself is not that interesting. Like he's kind of nothing. And the more you dig into him, the less you find of like a person there.
That's why we did how many episodes without doing an episode on him?
Quite a lot. Yes. But like you get like he's got like, he's got a tragic backstory like a lot of villains do. And that's it. I have a note here that he once wrote as Paul Knutson. He wrote a book as Paul Knutson called Aryan Asses. Wow. Which is not what you hope it is.
What could it possibly be?
It's like a critique of degenerates in the Aryanist movement.
Oh, so like, one of those typical Nazi things
where we got to get rid of our degenerates and clean house kind of thing. Yeah, but it's come on. Knutson, Aryan Asses.
Aryan Asses is not like Hitler /fic.
William Luther Pierce would have nailed that. He would have bought the rights to that and started publishing skinhead porn if he had that title. That was a businessman. All right. So the immediately after Oliver's father hangs himself, he marries Grace Needham. And Grace Needham has 2 daughters from a previous marriage that she brings in. Revilo and Grace never have their own children. All right, so he marries Grace Needham. Grace, much like his father's choice of second wife, Grace was supposed to give form to Revilo's genius. Grace was in the local theater, and they were both big fans of the local theater. And, so when Revilo made his first book, which was a translation from Sanskrit of a play called The Little Clay Cart. And so he has his wife's theater company put this on as a play in the local theater. According to
a musical,
according to the Daily Illinois,
it was a sad disappointment for a great many students and mothers who were much more interested in an evening of light entertainment than sitting through 4 solid hours of Hindu stagecraft.
So they all bring in their kids to come see some like fucking Lindsay Lohan style rom-com, whatever the fucking 1930s version of that
is. A 1930s version would be like, a musical theater.
Yeah,
it's like at its height then.
Yes, and it's called The Little Clay Cart. It sounds cute. Yeah. We might see like a Swami,
tap number.
And like the third hour starts.
Revilo's like, this is my interpretation of Vedic chanting.
Yes.
You're off key.
Okay. What he does is it's not a big hit, but he does turn it into his first book, his first published text. And in that sense, it was an impressive start to a classicist's career. Like he's now in the University Illinois.
So when is this? Did you say the year? Sorry.
He got married in 1930, and they put the play on that same year.
Okay.
So by 1934, though, he's already he's not really focusing on his academics as much as he is writing anti-New Deal articles for the magazine Nation's Business, anti-FDR stuff.
So this is the first political thing we know about him?
Yeah. He already comes out in the 30s as like anti-FDR. And he also, we know that by 1938, Oliver writes to his mentor, a guy named Professor Oldfather, who was a big deal back in the day as a classicist. That's his actual name.
Professor Oldfather.
A classicist.
Was this a father figure to him?
It was, in fact, his main father figure. There were rumors back in the day that he was a Nazi, but those rumors never seemed to bear out ultimately. But he was Oldfather because he spoke with a soft German accent and spoke about the classics. And his name was Oldfather.
Oldfather.
Yeah. And also a lot of his students apparently turned out Nazis. So I don't know, maybe there was something there, but anyway.
I'm sure he was a Nazi. Yes.
But
Oldfather's lecturing about
here's the thing.
Heimat.
Here's the thing. Is Oldfather got a letter from Oliver that Oldfather described as very pessimistic. Oliver said in this letter that he could
scarcely feel sympathy for the modern doctrine of kremata in air,
an ancient Greek phrase meaning money is the man. So you already get this sort of Myatt type, but he's a classicist actually, unlike Myatt, who thinks he's a classicist.
Yes, he's a real classicist.
Yes.
Myatt is a nothing.
Yes. He writes this letter to Oldfather before the war. He talks a bit about his own dad's fate. He blames materialistic culture on his dad's suicide and acknowledges his own like fanatical devotion to classicism as a principle that keeps society together. And he says that when these like hordes and these vandals come after the classics, these people that want ugly art, these types, these modernists, when they come for the classics, what they're doing is the degenerates, they're chopping at the trunk of civilization. And without the classics being taught in universities by respected professors like him, civilization is fucking over. That's it. It's done. And I wrote to Oldfather that he thinks probably it already might be over. He is maybe getting into Spengler at this point, although he definitely does later. But he writes in a very Spenglerian way to Oldfather, talking about how all civilizations have their natural cycles. This one's reaching its end, and perhaps all that's left to do is not to try to save this society, but to survive it. And but this is all about the classics. This isn't yet like. So he's already got this.
This is his worldview based off of his like bullying in private school, where he was duped, and then the telegram's not real, everyth's a lie, civilization is over, people don't know how to behave. In ancient times, I would have kept these people as slaves. And
he's not saying not all of that is vocalized in this letter. It's more of like a pessimistic philosophy of history that definitely implies these things.
There used to be societies that knew order and rules.
Yes, exactly.
And I would be king there.
Yeah, right. Right. But this is what he has instead. So when World War II breaks out, in 1942 rather, he joins up with the signal services for the U.S. Army and Army intelligence. Actually, he's a crypto analyst. He decrypts.
Do you know he was like America Firster? Or?
I meant to look that up actually before. I don't remember that. Mm-hmm. But he would be in that realm. Why not? Because he was an anti-FDR guy in the 30s already. Mm-hmm. Why not? We should look that up. But he worked in military intelligence and had at like a P2 level, which was like, that's kind of like how important you are in the system. So he stayed P2 for a while, which is okay. He had like below top secret clearance, which is very important because that's not what he'll say later. But he was like a decent cryptographer. He was good at it.
Propaganda duo.
Well, no. This is on a P1 to P4 scale.
Okay.
And so I'm only mentioning that because he gets very frustrated at his P2 status, you see. And he ends up writing this fucking pathetic little letter to his commanding officer demanding to know why like the whole U.S. Army is destroying his life now by not giving him this promotion on time. And here it is. So with the short story is that in 1943, his colonel suggests to him that when he gets a promotion, that this salary increase he's going to get at P4 will be enough to move him and his wife and the children to Washington, D.C. So before getting that promotion, Revilo just does it anyway. He just packs up and he moves them all, assuming he's going to get this promotion, which doesn't happen. So he says,
"The monetary loss thus imposed on me has had a very serious consequence. I have had to surrender insurance policies. I have been humiliated in the eyes of my family, exposed to my friends as a fool, for it was well known that I refused an offer of $4,200 plus expenses abroad, and the resultant worry has impaired my health."
So he's demanding that they give him this promotion now because
he was stupid and he moved to DC.
But he said that he was exposed as a fool. So
yes,
I mean,
yes. So that becomes the Army's problem, and so the Army starts asking themselves, like, how much do we need this guy? And there's a bit of back and forth on this until
he's
finally,
a classicist after all.
That's actually how it ends. It actually does end this way. So they finally are like, listen, this guy's a classicist. He knows all these languages. He speaks at this point probably competently 4 Romance languages. He's okay at German, that kind of thing. So he knows languages, and important ones for the war. So they say, like, well, we can't replace him. He's irreplaceable. Let's give him a little promotion. So they bump him up to a P3. They give him a little pay bump, and it's okay. It tides him out to the end of the war. And at the end of the war, he comes back to work for University of Indiana, where he's given an associate professor status. Eventually, very quickly, fast-tracked to a tenured professor. And that's super important for him because all of his legitimacy comes from that tenured position, which, because it's a tenured position and because he actually apparently keeps a pretty clean classroom, like he doesn't get a lot of student complaints and stuff like that. Of course, we're talking about segregation period. So all of his students were going to be white young men. But like you don't get a sense that he was going off on tangents necessarily in class. So they don't find an excuse ever to fire him. So at his craziest, he's still working at the University of Indiana and writing all his letterheads as, full professor, University of Indiana Classics Department, no matter what it says.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because when I pulled up the publication of Vindex, Mahet's Vindex on Liberty Bell, about the author, Dr. Revilo Pendleton Oliver, professor of classics at the University of Illinois for 32 years, is a scholar of international distinction who has written articles in 4 languages for the most prestigious publications in the United States and Europe.
Yeah.
Does it go on to say his first book was copiously annotated translation of the Sanskrit?
No.
Okay.
During World War II, Dr. Oliver was a director of research at a highly secret agency of the War Department and was cited for outstanding service to his country.
Does it go on to say one of the very few academicians?
Who has been outspoken in his opposition to the progressive defacement of our civilization. Dr. Oliver has long insisted that the fate of his countrymen hangs on their willingness to subordinate their doctrinal differences to the tough but idealistic solidarity which is the prerequisite of a majority resurgence.
So that's funny. That was 85?
80, something like 82 maybe.
What I read was like
84. Yeah.
Okay, what I read was from like 64. So
wow. Okay,
he's been running like the same blurb like for his whole fucking career.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Interesting.
I had like saying that his classroom was clean. I had once a professor who was like a fascist and horribly racist, but he was very proud that he had never mixed politics with his lectures, unlike all of the leftist professors and so on.
Very similar, actually, to Revilo.
So I think there is a type like that.
I think you're right.
This guy was a philosopher. So
I think you're right. Well, maybe he'll end up like Revilo, a celebrity.
Yeah.
All right. So
his life so far has not seemed super great. I gotta say.
No. No. No.
I mean, it's not bad for him. Like,
but like his granddad was lazy and had a bunch of kids and named one of them Revilo.
Yeah,
but he didn't want to think of a new name. And then That guy had kind of a fucked up, weird, sad life, and had another kid that he also named the same stupid name.
Yeah.
Who also, this is just...
But having like a pretty easy life outside of bullying and so on.
Once he got into the, once he found his
families are fucked up, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
But he found his little safe niche of like other, dorks that really love the classics and were a little fashy.
Sure, that would be fine.
But he was in military intelligence and then became a tenured professor. I mean, pretty easy kind of living.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. In fact, part of the reason, and he even says this in his letter to the army, he says the only reason why I haven't quit yet is because I'm waiting for this promotion to go through and because I don't want to get drafted.
Yeah.
Like, he's not good. He just said shit, He wasn't a great salesperson at first. His first play is like a 4-hour Sanskrit epic.
Yeah.
He tries to like sell himself for promotion by being like, well, I already moved here and you owe me. He's not great at relating to people.
No.
Until he finds his new niche, which begins around the 50s. But let me just say that what happens right before the 50s come around, already in 49, he's slowing down on his academic work. Like he did a couple books in his life that were academic, 3 maybe. And he did a few articles, mostly reviews of other books, right? As you do. And he reviewed a book on Latin pronunciation. And towards the end of the book, he ends up going off on a rant about
the happy hooligans who have for some time acted as the advanced agents of totalitarian despotism.
He writes in this 1949 Classics Journal review of a Latin grammar book. He said that there was
a concerted effort to stultify and brutalize the adolescent mind by concentrating its attention on the problems of human existence on the animal level.
Latin grammar, people. It's complex. Mm-hmm. There's a lot to it. And yeah, he writes here that should the classics be undermined, all other disciplines will be doomed to either
disappear or be made socially irrelevant by conversion into agencies for the propagation of lies.
Mm-hmm. That's the end of everything, boys. And so that's him already. That's before his right-wing turn.
Okay. This is before.
This is when he's like at his like loosey-gooseyest, He's like.
But we know that was he already like kind of a Spenglerian? Is that?
It sounds very much like that. I think he developed an interest in Spengler while he was at the university. Mm. I mean, he starts to talk a bit more Spenglerian. And when Yaki comes around, he'll be right on it and all on it. In fact, he ends up writing, he does a lot of work promoting Yaki in the United States. Mm-hmm. And probably the reason why it ended up being a national alliance thing at all was because of him.
I noticed no soundboard today.
It's there. It's just sleeping. It's waiting for its moment.
Nature took her course.
Okay.
That guy is a part of this story, no?
Oh, yeah, he is. He is indeed. So, in the 50s, he's kind of going off on a few things now. He's picked up the fluoride conspiracy, which was started in the 40s.
Yes.
And he's on that now and starting to tie it into attempts to destroy the gene pool and make us all into the word he uses, I'm sorry to say, is mongoloid, but that's him. That's him.
So he's a really kind of original conspiracy theorist, no?
Well, he didn't make this one up, but he does a good job of linking existing ones to other ones. Well, to only one conspiracy, actually, which is at first communism, but soon becomes just Jews. So 58 is a big year. 2 important things founded in 58. Liberty Lobby is founded in 58, which will be affiliated also with our guy Revilo, as is the John Birch Society, of which Revilo was a co-founder. He was on the original board of the John Birch Society.
But wasn't Liberty Lobby a split from the John Birch Society?
He would have split from the John Birch Society, but that happened the same year, I guess, because Liberty Lobby and John Birch are both 58 for sure. So I do think that John Birch was formed in January of 58. Mm-hmm. So I could believe that Willis went on his own way soon after. So he co-founds the JBS. And all right, so in this time, there's a woman who wrote a book. I'll put it in the description. It's fine. It's about a lady who used to be in the John Birch Society and grew up in that environment and sort of found her way out. But she writes this about meeting Oliver when she was a child in this period in the late 50s.
My parents welcomed Oliver enthusiastically, but he gave me the creeps. His long face was exaggerated by black hair glistening with pomade, bushy eyebrows, and beady eyes. He sported a mustache as wide as his mouth, and when he smiled, his lip curled into a snarl. Oliver always showed up in a starched white dress shirt, tie, and tweed sport coat. I never remember him removing that coat, even in the heat of the summer.
Very much still the same kid that was putting his head down and running across the boarding school promenade, you know?
Yeah.
But now he's found a classy way to express it. He's like a classicist, you know? People, when they see him, people have called the FBI on him because they thought he was foreign.
Mm-hmm.
Like
he does have that, like, I could see how the people would think that back then.
Yes.
He looks like a villain, kind of, like a foreign coded villain from a film.
Oh,
from this time period.
totally. Oh, yeah. He's got Bond villain written all over him, and he talks like it too.
Or like a 1930s or 40s film villain. You know what I mean?
Remember that the tentacles of the conspiracy reach into your hometown, where its puppets are promoting fluoridation, mental health, and innumerable other plans to accustom us to gradually increasing slavery and intimidation.
Ba-dum, ba-dum. Yes. So we can maybe hear a little bit of him. I think I'm a little confused about when some of these recordings are, but maybe we should just get a little glimpse of his voice, because I've been doing impressions and we haven't heard the real guy yet. So let's hear the man. This would be his speech called 50 Years After, and this was given...
Please tell me he's going to talk about sapping and purifying our precious bodily fluids.
Well, not in this one, no. This is actually him a little later during his National Alliance period, but we just need to hear his voice.
But it follows, of course, that the pompous mannequins are too ignorant and stupid to be entrusted with an academic responsibility greater than that of mopping the floors. Indeed, in many institutions, the janitors would never have done anything so silly. And in some, the janitors even protested the big brains imposition of brotherhood. So one wonders, on second thoughts, could safely be entrusted with a broom.
Highly insufferable in their voice, even worse than I imagined.
Yeah, it's hard for me to do it.
It's hard to do because it has a very strange intonation.
But that's also him when he's being playful. At other times, he takes it downtown and gets very serious. Yeah, that's his fucking voice.
Wow,
amazing. He had no friends.
What the fuck did you take that from? What was he talking about there?
That was a speech. That was like almost an introduction to the National Youth Alliance on their foundation.
Okay. Well, he does sound like he's talking to children somehow.
Well, he's talking about children too. He's talking about the youth standing up of today. Yeah. So he's given a lot of speeches in the late 50s. He's really getting around, although nobody knows he's a member of John Birch yet. Nobody knows that until 1960 when he starts to actually write for American Opinion, their amazing paper that they have. I've got 7 gigabytes of it at home. Brag. But.
I actually do some. I have a few too. From
how many gigabytes of American Opinion do you have?
Yeah, we'll have to compare.
I bet I have more gigabytes of American Opinion than you do. All right. So Oliver also began writing for American Opinion, the John Birch Society magazine. His articles in the summer of 1960 extolled white colonialism while calling black Africans unsanitary savages. This is also a time, by the way, he was using the word cannibal a lot. Like a lot. Like half of his stories ended with somebody getting eaten and him being like, liberals are fucking idiots. Like, look, they're all getting eaten. He thought that like Jomo Kenyatta was part of cannibalistic rituals.
Right, because he's extremely
extraordinarily racist. Yeah. But he's also very much pro-colonialism and imperialism.
Of course.
Like he wants to make that known. He calls like the Incan civilization the first communists and says that this proves that
I remember that from Birch.
John Birch.
Yeah.
He says that that shows us, that's proof in archaeology that communism is only one step above savagery, you know, so it might be okay for the savagest of people, but it's not good enough for us, you know, we're Faustians, we're Europeans, yada yada.
Interesting.
That's his late 50s. Yeah.
I wonder what is his philosophy of history? So we have savagery, then we have communism, then what happens.
But also, like,
well, there's a history of civilizations, and then I think what he's going to say is that there's a whole other non-history of non-civilized people, where they just sort of like sit there and flounder around in an eternal state of communist stupidity.
Do you think that he was just like jealous of people like Jomo Kenyatta who were like educated at much more prestigious like universities? I think that Kenyatta studied in like London's.
Because he studied at
like the London School of Economics.
I think he did. Well, because I know he studied with like Kraber and stuff, and they were all based out of San Francisco. But I think he was a really well educated man.
Yeah, do you think he was just like
yeah? Oliver is probably a little butthurt about this, and but again, he's going to have a solution to every problem, and you know, it's going to be the same solution that it always is. All right, so what happens here is by 1962. There is something interesting going on, though, with Revilo. And this is not something that you find in the typical text. This is some Tenapod deep digging here.
Oh.
And that is something called the Congress of Freedom, a.k.a.
Nazis.
Florida Nazis. Let me pull this up real quick. I want to just mention this. I'm thinking I might want to do a full ep on this at some point, but in short, Revilo P. Oliver, the FBI believed that Revilo was very close to this group that was calling for the mass executions of Jews and commies, who of course are the same people. Most of the people on their list were neither Jewish nor communist, but
not surprising for the Congress of Freedom.
So at around the same time that Oliver is writing kind of like letters hoovering Hoover, essentially, just like being like, oh, Hoover, oh my God, J. Edgar Hoover, I love you. I love your work. I love your book. Like, could you sign it? Like, he's really super excited about J. Edgar Hoover and writes multiple letters, just like, oh, I just think you're just so cool. You know, like if you need anything, Mr. Hoover, you can count on me, sir. This is actually a letter he writes. I already have suspicions of several of my colleagues at the university.
To top it off, he's like the worst kind of tattletale too.
Yes, I mean, he's a little snitch. So the Congress of Freedom was behind something called the Council for Statehood, and behind all of that was another group whose name I will come up with in a second. Also, similarly like generic, you know, and American sounding. And this was tied to people that we haven't much talked about, but are important, like Dan Smoot. But more importantly, Gerald L.K. Smith, who we're familiar with, and our guy, Merwin K. Hart, who we've talked about kind of offhand, a famous anti-Semite for the period. The Legion loved him in the 60s, American Legion that is, and also Revilo P. Oliver, who was a member of the John Birch Society while this is starting, right? He was this thing picks up in like 1959. And it goes to maybe 1962 or something like that. And the FBI are following these guys around. They're printing all their texts and their reports, and it's stuff about how like it's list of people to kill, you know, and they're like, if anybody's going to assassinate people, it's going to be these guys. And then at some point they just lose interest. And they also decide that Revilo P. Oliver is probably only there. And they'll say this again later when he becomes a part of the Minutemen mailing lists and is somehow connected to the Minutemen. They'll say, well, whatever, he's a professor. For sure, it's something academic. And that's in the FBI reports. They're like, I don't see any reason to follow this guy around. He's not making spurious comments about the agency, which he wasn't, actually. He was very nice about the FBI. However, he was not so nice to the CIA, who he, by 1962, was claiming was already an extension of the NKVD. The Soviet Union had taken over the State Department and the CIA, and the Dulles brothers, both of them, were some of the biggest communists in America.
Oh, so that was news to them.
And I checked; it's the same Dulles brothers that I was wondering. Yeah. It's not some other group of Dulles.
I mean, this is typical Bircher stuff. Yeah. I mean, it's just
it's a hard Birch, though. You know what I mean? Like it's on the hard end,
and it's communist.
Well, yes.
And we mentioned before this idea that there was kind of a division in the American ruling class between the more kind of American firsters who had this. We mentioned it before. This Association of American Association of Manufacturers. What was the name?
Oh yeah, NAM. Yeah. NAM. Yeah.
National Association of Manufacturers. So in this theory, they were the founders and sponsors of the John Birch Society, and so that was that like representation of that interest of that faction of the ruling class.
Yeah.
And then supposedly the other faction was Council of Foreign Relations, which was the Dulles brothers and like CIA and stuff and so on.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that actually happened, but that's one kind of a view of those divisions.
Well,
I mean, I think they were both very fascist, but I guess the second one was more kind of globally oriented, kind of imperialist, and the first one was more supposedly kind of insular, I guess.
I don't know. I remember that these groups crossed a lot. I feel like maybe, I don't know. My like, I don't know, but my instinct now would be to say that might be overthinking it a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know that they were necessarily that organized even.
Yeah.
Including the fucking CIA. Like, it's a fucking shit show over there, you know?
Yeah.
Especially now. Like, they're fucking MK Ultra people right now.
Yeah.
You know? Like, so I don't know. But I would like to just say, before we take this little break, that Revilo is a co-founder of John Birch Society. Revilo is now hooking up slowly with the Liberty Lobby crew on the side. He is connected somehow to this Congress of Freedom guys that want to like do a Turner Diaries in Florida, basically. Like and at the same time, he's almost a partner and a contributor, an editor of the National Review, William F. Buckley's completely mainstream paper. Along with that, he's writing for the American Mercury, which used to be a theater paper and then turned slowly more right wing until it became an anti-Semitic like pamphlet, basically.
Wasn't that like
interesting.
Wasn't that a Nazi newspaper that Rockwell was affiliated with?
Eventually, it would be, but it started as like a theater review thing that H.L. Mencken started, you know, and then just got taken over by increasingly more fascist managements.
Yeah,
he was contributing to that. But he was also contributing to like completely mainstream things, like completely just center right.
Yeah, that's usually how it's presented. Like the spectrum of the American right is like the most moderate one is Buckley and his crew, National Review.
Yeah.
Then right of them are the Birchers.
Yeah.
Who Buckley at some point, who was a CIA guy, denounced as being crazy.
Yeah.
And then more right wing than that is Liberty Lobby, who had like, unlike the Birchers, Liberty Lobby had this kind of in some way like anti-American perspective. Like they were, for example, unlike the Birchers, they were against the Vietnam War from things like this.
Yes, but they didn't see it, of course, as an anti-American perspective because one thing we need to remember about...
Well, they were Yorkian.
They were Yorkian.
Yorkie was like more kind of European.
But Revilo was a constitutionalist.
Okay.
Like, he will frame a lot of this stuff, even at his most like black-pilled siege place, which he kind of started in, honestly. In fact, I kind of feel like he was the seed of the siege pill in a lot of ways.
It seems like it.
But he, even then, he was still like, we have to defend the Constitution, even if it no longer holds. You know, we have to use unconstitutional means to reclaim it from these people who stole it. Yeah, we can take a little break.
This song really should be prefaced with the observation of a newspaper editor I met once. He said the John Birch Society really should be called the Jack Ash Society. A bunch of jackashites from Bellamont, Mass. have suffered a terrible fright. They looked under their beds and discovered such reds as Allen and Milton and Dwight. If more you would know of this jackash credo, read the blue book, the black book, the white. If you do, you will find we're all reds of some kind, like Allen and Milton and Dwight. Joe McCarthy is dead, so Jackash instead leads the anti-communist fight. U.S. Reds he has found swarming all around, some 179 million so far, including Allen and Milton and Dwight. If you believe in more hospitals, housings and schools, new highways and civil rights, the Ashites will add you to the un-American list, along with Allen and Milton and Dwight. Social Security's a Bolshevik plot, cooked up by some shrewd Muscovite. So go naked you must, or be a security risk like Allen and Milton and Dwight. Beware of good pay and the minimum wage. It's part of the socialist blight, created by conspirators bold like Allen and Milton and Dwight. Unemployment insurance is another red trick that slipped by in the dark of the night. So send back your checks lest you share their fate of Allen and Milton and Dwight. These jackasses are drawing the lunatic fringe, assembling on the right. Barry's their man, he has no pinkish tan like Allen and Milton and Dwight. There's a man sitting on the Un-American Committee, he's a jackass societyite. I wonder what day he will send out a subpoena to Allen and Milton and Dwight. The jackasses say that in World War II we should have joined with the Third Reich. Adolf can pass their loyalty test, but not Allen nor Milton nor Dwight. They want to prepare for a nuclear war, kill everything human in sight. If you'd rather live, you're a communist dupe like Allen and Milton and Dwight. So all the jackasses should take some advice, wake up and start seeing the light. Their Führer may find they are red agents too, like Allen and Milton and Dwight. Some good songs and a few bad ones have a moral. Here's the moral of this one. Now a candy bar's sweet, milk chocolate's a treat, but ponder before you bite. The worms hiding inside may shrivel your hide like Allen and Milton and Dwight.
So let's see where Revilo was on the question of communism here. Here's him explaining the fundamentals of communism.
Oh.
And in this time, in the early 60s, he's really making his rounds. Oh, I want to add this too. At some point in his life, around this time actually, Revilo will describe science fiction as the current fairy stories of the modern age. He does this shortly after making the statement that juvenile delinquents was not really a thing, and what was real was that they were criminals, and what we need to do to them to keep the criminals out is have our schools start beating these kids, like keeping them in line. He writes this within 1 year of Starship Troopers coming out, and we know that that Heinlein and his wife were both John Birch Society members around this time. I am wondering if there would have been a connection there between Heinlein and Oliver, because also Oliver was one of those... It's him
saying that they're the fairy tales of the modern age in like a disparaging way?
No. He's like, it's the only thing we have left, is what he was saying.
Okay.
And that was, again, this is like peak Heinlein. This is when Heinlein was really coming in and writing these books. He was a JVS guy. And also Oliver like made it a point to like be among the intellectuals. You know what I mean? He was always the token intellectual. So if there's another one in the room, I'm pretty sure they're gonna at least share some ideas. So I'm wondering if there's either a Revilo Oliver influence on Starship Troopers, or if there's, maybe it goes the other way and there's like a Heinlein influence on Revilo, which is either way. It'd be interesting.
Yeah.
But it's also something sort of in the background. It's just kind of cooking in the background here. It places him in the Tenna family. You know?
Yes. I mean, he's already deeply in the Tenna family.
Yeah, he's the Oldfather of the Tenna family. All right. So, here's him talking about communism in the early 60s. This is going to be a shit recording. I tried to clean it up, and I think I fucked it up. Let's try.
This country, they're preaching internationalism. Over in Africa, they're preaching nationalism. The point is that the communist has no principles. There is no ideological conflict here. The object of the communist is the success of the conspiracy. And he is perfectly willing to do anything to further the conspiracy. He has no objection to professing this belief or that belief. He's trained in the party. And I think that's one of the most difficult things to understand. Because most of us think in terms of certain principles that we have. Now, we can imagine ourselves violating those principles for some particular end. But we can't imagine ourselves without them.
Sorry, that was utter nonsense. So the objective of communism is to further the conspiracy.
But then what does that mean, right? So
Yes,
if the communists, I'll tell you right now. So this is an important moment for his relationship to the John Birch Society, because again, the problem all of our guys on the show have with the John Birch Society is that they're not sufficiently anti-Semitic.
Right.
So the answer to this for Revilo was that, well, okay, so think about it. Like the communists, they don't believe anything, right? They're nationalists in Africa and they're internationalists in America. Like they just floating around. So what does that tell you? It tells you that communism isn't an ideology at all. It itself is only a conspiracy. So if we ask who is behind it, there's only one answer. It's the only people out there without a state. The only people out there without like a political entity.
Mm-hmm.
They had to make one from scratch. So they made up this whole thing about communism versus materialism, and they're on both sides of it. And those people are, of course, the Chokfukians, the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Yes.
I was confused because of all the fantasy lore he was working with there. I assumed it was
So does he
a
actually
made-up person.
does he say that in that particular speech?
No.
Well, what I'm trying to say is
he's still
just saying
there.
the conspiracy.
Yeah, but he privately and among his professional colleagues, he's known as a virulent anti-Semite. But when he goes out to talk to, for instance, the Daughters of the American Revolution, he'll play it down a little bit. He'll lead with communism, but conclude with, don't mistake it for an ideology. It's not. It's a conspiracy and there's someone else behind it, And then as he finally moves through the 60s and fully breaks with John Birch and all that, he tends to drop more of the communist stuff and pick up more of the Jewish stuff. Mm-hmm. And by the time you get to him in like the 80s, he's basically just talking about Jews now,
Right.
But this is kind of where this transition begins. Communism itself is the conspiracy. There's a funny little note about this from a person that was present in this talk. Oliver, the title of his talk, by the way, was Conspiracy and Degeneracy. He reveals that
educators compel students to share rooms with Asiatics and Negroes, with well-known sexual perverts, and with narcotics addicts.
The narcotics themselves come from subversive sources. The heroin from Red China and Red Cuba, and LSD imported from Israel.
Oh, that's where LSD's from?
That's right.
Damn.
Yeah.
They cut it out on BDS. Fuck. Can't do acid anymore.
It sucks. Conspiracies alone cannot, of course, explain our decline. He called on biology, racial distinctions that preceded humanity itself, and
despite the limitations imposed on science by liberal intellectuals and the like, all evidence indicates that physical traits and probably intelligence and moral instincts are unalterably hereditary.
And concludes by saying,
All men are created unequal,
Oh.
and there is nothing we can do about that.
Raucous applause. Yeah. He's on like tour in 62, 63 here. So, So that's him. That's what he's doing right now. But then in November 22nd, Dallas, Texas, 1963, Kennedy loses his mind. Brains, I mean. And it's a big deal.
We've got to put in the... Nah, never mind.
Okay.
Kennedy got
Kennedy's
killed.
shattered head is concrete.
So Kennedy gets killed in November. In December of 1963, Revilo P. Oliver is already writing Marksmanship in Dallas, Marksmanship in Dallas, which wouldn't come out until February of the next year in 64 in American Opinion. the John Birch Society paper. This is actually going to be the last thing he writes for John Birch Society. So this claims that there is a Soviet conspiracy to take out Kennedy because Kennedy was thinking about becoming an Americanist again and dropping his relationship to the Soviet Union, because Kennedy had, of course, after 1962, after the Cuban Missile Crisis,
where Kennedy famously did not come off crazy and,
yes, because
to start nuclear war.
Because he didn't start nuclear war. So obviously he's working with the communists, right? So he negotiates something with Khrushchev, whatever, and this is a sign to Revilo that Kennedy is now part of the communist conspiracy, along with everybody else, along with the State Department, the CIA, and the fucking Council on Foreign Relations, yeah? And that all of these people together have worked to take Kennedy out because Kennedy was going to turn against the Soviet Union. This is one of his three theories. So
the CIA killed Kennedy.
They were involved.
Because they are communists. And
yes.
Kennedy was considering stopping being a communist.
Yes. Well, when you say it like that, it sounds silly. But listen, so here's what gets me about this is that I would really love to hear from listeners if they know of an earlier CIA article about this, because in his own article about this, CIA killed Kennedy connection being in public articles and like that. I know it really picks up in the 64, like in the first half of 64, you end up getting like the stuff that people still look at now. But I'm curious to know if anybody knows of that being done already by December of 63, because he's already on it in December of 63. And
so you're wondering if he's one of the progenitors.
I think he's one of the first,
conspiracy.
But he claims that he got it from another text that he was reading, but he doesn't cite what it is. And there's been a lot of theorizing about or hypothesizing about what it might be. But the texts that are usually claimed to be that text all seem to come out in 64. So I'm personally, I'm interested. It's just because it would be fun for the game.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? We need this for the trivia night.
Well, I know that Liberty Lobby was very anti-CIA, and they were later connected with the most famous of these. Kennedy was killed by CIA guys, Fletcher Prouty.
Yeah, right.
Who was an associate of Liberty Lobby.
Yes.
So maybe it was something coming out of them, and because we know that Revilo Oliver left the John Birch Society and became close with the Liberty Lobby.
Well, this is when this happens. Yeah. So this is kind of his grand exit from the John Birch Society. This is his like mic drop moment when he moves over. So there's also this, right? So initially suspicions were cast on John Birch Society members of Dallas because the Dallas John Birch Society was fucking crazy. Like they were the crazy ones of the John Birch Society. They were the ones going around putting up like targets on Kennedy's head and like posters around Dallas and stuff like that. And the wanted for treason posters were all them. And then also there was that guy, what's his name? Edwin Walker. The dude that
the general,
the guy that fucking gladioed Greece, like he was helping the kill commies in Greece, and he was also initially suspected as being part of this. Edwin Walker and Revilo P. Oliver, buddy.
Yeah.
So my interpretation is that the second that aspersions came down on this Dallas JBS group, I think Revilo's reaction was to shift it to the left and say no. It's not us. It was this Soviet thing. But I also wonder if he kind of thought if it was their guys, you know? Like, I wonder if that's why he was right on the spot with it. Because if he was, part of him was like, yeah, maybe that was us, actually. We really wanted to do this, you know? So I don't know, but he really was on it right away. And it was a huge splash. I mean, it was everywhere in early 64 when it finally started coming around. And like the FBI was getting constant letters about it. The University of Indiana was getting letters about it. It was a big deal.
It's in Indiana or Illinois?
Illinois, yeah. And most people were, let's say, turned off by it. They were insulted. They thought it was insane. And they were like, this guy's a full professor. He's got tenure at a major university. He claims to have contacts. He claims to have worked for the Army intelligence in a top secret unit. Like,
I think he originally also said Indiana instead of Illinois a few times.
Well, I said Illinois enough that I can cut it in when I need it. That's like his splash. And the John Birch Society is not down with this. The Welch is not down with this. Is a step too far even for Welch. And he leaves. Later on in the 80s, he'll say that he left because Welch was a Jew commie. And he knew all along.
He said something like he found out that the John Birch Society is being run by a secret committee of Jews.
There you go. Oh, okay. That's right. Yeah. That's absolutely right. Also, Revilo would also be suspected of being a communist.
Of course.
And people thought that he might be another guy named Karl Oliver, who was arrested as a member of the Communist Party in the 1920s. And they were like, we think it's him. We're pretty sure it's him, but nobody else believes it's him.
Who made that accusation?
It was floating around the University of Illinois, and like some student group repeated it, and it got kind of picked up. And then when they tracked the student group down and said it, they were like, "Oh, we didn't know if that was true. We just said it. We just heard it." So that's just one of those stories that follows them around. But it's just funny that everybody's a communist. It's fun when they get accused of being communists.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, it ties up in a nice little bow. It's almost like a palindrome. Right? It's the same backwards and forwards. Starts and ends with communism. Yeah. So let's see. So in 1963, right before he writes this, by the way, Revilo gets a raise at the University of Illinois, and quite a large one. He's up to like $120,000 a year now, but in today's money. So like it's not like the University of Illinois is like trying to stop this. Like at this point, he's made a big name. This is his fourth year in the JBS. You know what I mean? Like they're giving him a raise now, so it's not like they were not part of this. All right, we're getting pretty close here. So now I guess we need to talk about National Youth Alliance. All right, so in 1966, he's out there giving speeches to white citizens councils meetings. Like he's everywhere. And he writes, and after the National Review also writes a repudiation of him. Buckley does, in fact, of John Birch Society as a whole, and also Revilo. Revilo responds by sending in the mail a tiny facsimile of a Florentine knife, and on the card, to stab your next friend in the back with, if you have another friend.
That's highbrow.
Yes. He probably thought of that for months. That's how I'm going to get him. So that's how Revilo responded to Buckley for stabbing him in the back. Yeah. And this is when he gets a supposed extortion letter in the mail. And he turns into the FBI. I've read this extortion letter. It is basically a huge screed from a crazy person calling him gay in every pejorative way you can imagine, as well as having pictures of a dripping penis with an arrow that says, "Hey, Revilo, you like this?" So this is sent to him. It's titled "Dear Revilo Oliver Cocksucker" is actually the name of it. So Revilo sends this to the FBI and claims he's being extorted.
Was this the title of our episode?
It can't be. No. This guy is like not okay either, but basically, that's what's interesting about it to me is that like he calls it an extortion letter, but I've read it many times because it's actually pretty funny. But there's no extortion in it. Like the only way I could interpret that is if he was afraid.
Yeah, extortion implies that
there's something there.
That there's something
he's afraid of coming out.
Right.
It was a weird reaction. And the FBI like read it and they were like, okay, the FBI actually said it's a prank, but they agreed to file it under extortion and do an investigation anyway. But
Hoover's like, I understand.
I get it. We'll track this fucker down.
We're both at the club.
It's probably the same guy that wrote this to me. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So in 1969, there is a group of youth for Wallace that have given up on Wallace as he fails to nab the Republican nomination, yet nonetheless are raising money still at the end of his campaign. And they get a bunch. And all that money goes into a shiny new organization called the National Youth Alliance that we've covered in great detail in the William Pierce episodes.
Oh, yeah. It's a while ago. Go back and listen.
Yes, that's right. And as you might recall, there was a leadership conference at the Penn Motel where National Youth Alliance kind of came into its own. And a bunch of these young Republican types that had gone for Wallace, these suit and tie, the class guys, these Harry Potters. They all show up at this Penn Hotel room, believing they're going to be, given a nice speech about the next Wallace, the next part of the Republican movement. And they kind of get that. They kind of get that because inside, as they hear Horst Wessel Lied begin to bleed out into the hallway, and they open the doors, they see Nazi flags, Nazi memorabilia, like lying around, and a lot of these guys, again, as it turns out later, 2 of the 12 chapters of National Youth Alliance were Nazi. The 2 that were run by the owners of the National Youth Alliance, the rest were run by these young Republican fucks. And they all show up for the leadership conference. And it's a pretty good way of figuring out who's still in,
That'll root them out.
That roots them out real fast. So a lot of them turn around and write letters of complaint to the NYA leadership, which is, of course, Willis Carto and Lou Byers at the time. And but most importantly, what they get when they walk in is a speech by Revilo P. Oliver called The Next 50 Years.
Revilo Oliver is giving a speech surrounded by Nazi flags at this point.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he tells people this.
What is significant is what was done in a few institutions by young Americans. When I use that word, I mean young Americans, descendants and heirs of the creators of the Western world. I do not mean all featherless bipeds that, regardless of race, color, or creed, happen to be on our soil at the present time.
Which is very Patriot Front guy.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Yeah.
So an American, I believe, is a member of the European race, any of the nations of the European race. And they not only, you aren't American simply by being a member of the European race. You have to have lived in America and assimilated to the American culture, the American heritage, which is harder to do nowadays because our culture has been so diluted.
So he shows up and does one of these, gives the Thomas Rousseau argument to the Republicans in the room, and a lot of them stay. A lot of them. So much so, the National Youth Alliance, as we know, grows up into the National Alliance, which becomes the largest neo-Nazi movement maybe ever at its height. Yeah. Which was led, of course, by William Luther Pierce.
But he split with Willis Carto at some point, right?
So there's a huge falling out, as there always is, when you put too many Führers in the Reichstag. Yeah. And they begin to battle over the mailing lists. Revilo P. Oliver takes the side of Lou Byers, who was a co-founder with Willis Carto of the National Youth Alliance. Willis Carto is not well liked. Even by a guy like Revilo P. Oliver, who has very few friends to spare, yet nonetheless feels compelled to talk shit about Willis Carto to a journalist who publishes it in the National Review. And it's
was he affiliated with Liberty Lobby for a period?
He was. He was. I don't know if he was a board member, but he was definitely writing for Liberty Lobby.
But and what's the relation of the National Youth Alliance and Liberty Lobby?
I think it's not official, except in so much as Willis Carto was leading both.
Okay.
And so, I mean, there's not like a big difference either. It's just National Youth Alliance grew out of a specific youth movement surrounding Wallace's campaign. Yeah. You can imagine what kind of young people were doing that. These kind.
Yeah.
Nazis. So, so Pierce incorporates the new National Youth Alliance after the split between Carto and Byers. And Revilo announces publicly that Pierce is, in fact, the legitimate inheritor of the crown of the National Youth Alliance, that Carto is a fool and he's out. And Pierce is the way of the future.
Nature took her course.
That's correct.
So Revilo Oliver, after the John Birch Society, spent some time in Liberty Lobby, the more extreme, more openly Nazi version of Bay.
Yeah, that was his kind of new home for a bit before National Youth Alliance,
which was founded by Willis Carto, who was a follower of Francis Parker Yockey.
Yes, thank you for bringing that back.
Which we covered him in 4 episodes.
Yeah,
or maybe 8 episodes.
Oh, at least.
Because we covered a book on him by Kevin Coogan, and then we also covered his huge book Imperium that you read. Right.
And we watched the Harry Potter movie Imperium.
Yes.
And then we made our own movie Imperium 2.
Yes. So he spent some time in Liberty Lobby. which I guess is the period when he gets acquainted with the thought of Francis Parker Yockey, who Willis Carto briefly met just before Yockey died.
Wait, let me correct you on that, actually. So he had snuck in a review of Imperium back when he was still writing for the National Review.
Okay.
So this was before the break with JBS. He might have known Carto at that time. I've had a hard time figuring out exactly when they became friends, but he was already, I think, a Yockian. And then now as we move into like the mid 60s, he's going to be really sort of knocking the Yock. And I'll give you a little hint of what he says about some of it.
And just so while he's in Liberty Lobby, Willis Carto with other people starts the National Youth Alliance, and there's a split there, and then William Pierce becomes the leader of the National Alliance.
Yeah, he basically inherits Lou Byers' share of this split.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And National Alliance becomes the most successful neo-Nazi organization in America.
Yeah. Tied to the Order, tied to Resistance Records.
But William Pierce was also, for a period, one of the leaders of the American Nazi Party, which was before or after this?
Well, contemporaneously. So there is also a connection with Revilo P. Oliver and the American Nazi Party through that Congress of Freedom group that was kind of weird, those terrorists in Florida. They had some ANP linkage, and Revilo was also around there. So it does kind of all tie together.
Is this Freedom Congress people? Are they like militia tied in some ways? Is this honestly, that kind of?
It was like, it seemed like
early
neighborhood
militia era.
It was early militia era. That's true. But the vibe that I get from them was that they were a lot like kind of an early version of the White Citizens Councils, but with this more open undercurrent of intending to do terrorisms and assassinations. I'm curious about them. I would like to do a full up on them. There's not a lot on them, so
I feel like there's something in my mind that I know I've read. I'm wondering if it's when I was reading about what's his face, World Church of Creator.
Klassen. Klassen, his name actually also popped up in this.
Because Klassen was, also JBS, but didn't like him, and he was linking up also with these people that were kind of armed and more extreme. And I'm wondering if that was also whatever this Congress of Freedom people. It would kind of make sense.
Yeah, so they were called Council for Statehood and Congress of Freedom, and
because Klassen was in Florida too. That's the thing to remember.
Okay, all right. Well, I mean, maybe. I mean, this is the thing is we're now in the part where like all of our old friends are now starting to poke their heads up again, and we're struggling to remember what we wrote in their yearbooks already. Most likely to assassinate a porn store owner, that kind of thing. But I would like to add here at this time. So about Revilo's money stream, right? Like he's got his income from the university, but he's also getting support from the Countess Guardabassi, also based in Florida, kind of a neighbor of Mar-a-Lago, actually. Countess Guardabassi was married to Count Guardabassi. Countess was an American. The Count was Italian. And they were named Count and Countess by none other than Benny Boy Benito Mussolini himself when he came to visit them in Florida, which he often did to complain about how Americans were too slow on the uptake with fascism. Yeah. So that woman, and her fucking son would eventually have a Heritage Foundation fellowship named after him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So these people were funding Revilo for a while until she died in the 70s. And so that was some of his.
By funding Revilo,
money.
You mean like funding his political activity?
I believe so. I think
presumably he was financially okay.
He had a steady salary. He's a tenured professor. He wasn't struggling for money, but I think this was fun money. This is the money you could throw around on a trip to Tampa to like speak to the Daughters of the Revolution.
Nazis, or Daughters of the Revolution. One the other.
Yeah, or the Confederacy for that matter. But yeah, so his his 60s are just hopping. He's in it. He's like on top of the world. Everybody loves / hates him. He's like in 3 or 4 very important American Nazi movements simultaneously. He's speaking to all of them. He's speaking to the American Society of Physicians about how Africans are all cannibals. and how property is the sign of all civilization. He's starting to write about Christianity increasingly, saying that Christianity, yes, is the heart of the West. It was something that the pagans adopted freely because it works well with the European pagan mindset. The problem is only now that the Jews have taken it over, and now Christianity is entirely Jewish. You know, that's where he starts to move increasingly in the 70s and 80s, especially. But now, so National Youth Alliance is blowing up. He's going to deny that he's an official of it, yet he feels comfortable giving William Luther Pierce his official status as the inheritor of the throne, you know, the beer can throne, they called it. So we're kind of quickly coming up now to his like late career, but just a word on Imperium and some stuff he has to say about it. So yeah, Ray's very right to point out that Imperium was very quintessential to this whole thing. And it was one of those things that also separated him off from the mainstream right, because the National Review was actually quite annoyed that he mentioned Imperium at all.
Right.
And even fucking Robert Welch in John Birch Society thought Imperium was full of shit. And Welch loved Spangler, but he really did not like Imperium. He thought it was unreadable trash, which he's right about.
By the way, about the Congress of Freedom, the Congress of Freedom thing that we mentioned. So the ADL says that Willis Carto serves as the director of the Congress of Freedom,
all right,
which sought to build coalitions between racist and hard-right libertarians, and was an executive secretary of Liberty and Property. Which he founded. So
there was also a thing that was very much like tradition family property that they had, but it was called like God, Freedom, and Property or something like that. It was some similar.
So this Congress of Freedom was allegedly already a connection with Willis Carto.
That's interesting. I'm glad you looked that up. Yeah. So it all, and again, really, it's a tight knot. This is the group from which all of our podcast eventually was born from. Like Siege will come out of all of this, you know, ultimately.
Right.
This mix of like A&P weirdness.
Well, I mean,
Imperium.
there is a direct kind of connection there, because it's. Would you say that Revilo Oliver was a kind of a mentor to William Pierce?
Revilo P. Oliver was the mentor of Pierce.
And William Pierce was the mentor of James Mason.
Yes, he was.
I mean,
yeah, it's a, yeah. And then Oldfather was the mentor of Revilo. So it all goes back to the Oldfather.
So from Oldfather to Jim.
Maybe I'll give Oldfather another look. You know what I mean? Maybe he's more important than the histories make him out here. But let's kind of squeeze to the end, I suppose. So let's listen to him talk a little bit about Imperium. It's hard to get audio of him talking in detail, but I can maybe add some. So let's hear what he says. This would be in, again, the 60s.
The first real effort, so far as I know, to bring together the scattered and silent elite of American youth is now being made by the National Youth Alliance under the leadership of Mr. Lewis T. Byers.
So this is 62.
A young man of undoubted integrity and true devotion, matured by extensive experience in conservative and anti-communist circles. This could be the turning point for which we have so long hoped. The principle of union in the textbook of the new organization is Francis Parker Yockey's brilliant and long suppressed work Imperium,
ignored.
a philosophy of history. It was virtually unknown until it was republished a few years ago. It has now been reprinted in a popular edition, primarily for the instruction and use of members of the new alliance. I have twice before criticized Imperium as a philosophic synthesis of the lessons of history, pointing out, inter alia, that its major thesis was confirmed and corroborated by the entirely independent work of Lawrence R. Brown, The Might of the West, and by the antecedent work of the great Oswald Spengler, The Hour of Decision. The essential point now is that Imperium, and through it the National Youth Alliance, for the first time tells the elite of young Americans what they have so long and doubtfully waited to hear. The National Youth Alliance speaks to young Americans of honor, loyalty, race, and Western man's will to conquer or die. It summons them not to meetings of a ladies' missionary society,
which he goes to,
but to a struggle against great odds. It warns them Not that ladylike conservatives must be careful to love everybody, but that the treason of the slimy Ganelon can be defeated only if the men of the West are still willing to die in the pass of Roncesvalles. This is a bugle call that cannot fail to rouse what Jung calls our racial psyche. And it would be sheer impertinence for you or me to try to add footnotes. But in sober fact, this last effort of the West faces fearful odds.
There's a lot there.
This was also part of his this is also part of his inauguration of the National Youth Alliance. You can tell, this is part of the grand entry. They introduced the organization with Imperium being published. That's how they bring it in. A bit like how these post Atomwaffen or even Atomwaffen guys treat Siege. They inaugurate the, you know what I mean? They get James Mason to sign off or not care about their own edition, and then they put it out, and now they're a group.
Yeah,
it's yeah.
This is very interesting. I think that maybe we should just mention that in our kind of previous attempt to summarize this history, which I don't remember in great detail, I have to say.
It's been a few hundred episodes.
Is that when William Pierce succeeded Byers as the leader of what would become National Alliance, I think he at least, if not rejected and neglected Yockey as a kind of a central figure, right?
Yeah, he was really attracted to Savitri Davies' writings more than anybody, I think. And
William Pierce was not a Yockeyan. He was
no, but that's a good point. Yeah, Yockey kind of broke off at that point. But let's remember that Kevin Strom, who is a Yockeyan, who also was part of the National Alliance thing and ran their websites and shit like that.
He became a leader, I think, after William Pierce.
Yeah, he is a Yockeyan, and he's also another student of Revilo's directly.
He was directly mentored by him.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. He maintains now actually Revilo P. Oliver's online archives.
Is he a pedophile?
Oh yeah.
He went to prison, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Can't throw a rock around here.
He's the one who kind of looks like an obvious pedophile, right?
He's one of them.
Yeah,
he's one of them.
Revilo's another one, but it never, for all we know, that never occurred.
Yeah,
but he does have the mustache.
He has the pedophile glasses, no?
Who, Revilo?
No, those.
Okay. Yeah. He's got the kind that you pick when you want to play one as a comedy on TV.
Yeah.
He's got, absolutely. He was running the message boards. He's that guy. Oh my God. So
I like the man of race, whose destiny is to conquer.
I think he said men of West
and race.
Oh,
well, he liked both
men
of
the
words very
West,
much.
the men of race, whose destiny is to conquer or be killed or something.
Because who doesn't have true race is the Jews. Because he makes that clear as well. Much like communism is not an ideology, being Jewish is not being part of a race.
It's a shape-shifting thing.
It's super racial, you know? And this is why it's so easy for them to adopt all these different positions, because they don't have the racial soul that these true civilizations have, the ones that the organism gave us in Yockey's in the Yock block.
And he cites Jung as well,
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, buddy. So, in the 70s.
I wonder if he had correspondence with Myatt. He probably did, yeah.
Well, I assume if he was going to put out Vindex, he did.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
I would love to see that.
Yes.
Well, Myatt, baby, haven't heard from you in a while, but if you want to annoy us, send us that.
Send us the correspondence.
We're going to hate it. We'll hate it so much. I hope you don't do it.
Yeah.
We won't read it in your fake voice.
No, we'll finally treat you right.
Yes, we will give you the respect you deserve. I miss him. All right, so
I'm so close on changing my mind on my. If only he gave me some.
If he gave us the right argument,
yes.
We would definitely
some
come
evidence,
around. Some probative evidence would be helpful of his relationship with Revilo P. Oliver, and then I'll accept that he's numinous. So Willis Carto was not liked, of course, by Revilo P. Oliver, and he mentioned in this National Review article that him and his scabrous associates were running the organization into the ground and all that. But by the 70s, he's picked his side. but he actually does make up with Carto, joining the board of the National Review and doing Holocaust revision stuff alongside people like M.A.R. Barker around the same time.
Wait, National Review?
A National Historical Review.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
So many nationals and reviews here.
Big difference.
Not that big, but not as big as the National Review might like.
Yeah.
How about that? So, So, and this is, I guess, one of those many connections is, in fact, Revilo P. Oliver. And he starts to engage in these Holocaust revision stuff.
Institute of Historical Review, right?
Institute for Historical Review. And the
Journal of Historical Review, something like that. I don't know.
No, it doesn't. I mean, whatever. M.A.R. We talked about M.A.R. Barker.
Yeah.
He's going to be making a lot of these cases. And I'm really also wondering when we soon get to reading the John Franklin letters, which was, again, the predecessor to the Turner Diaries, given personally by Revilo P. Oliver to William Luther Pierce. When we read that, I'm also going to be looking out for Serpent's Walk stuff, too. Because he was also, remember, M.A.R. Barker, also philologist, linguist, classicist, wrote about Sanskrit and stuff like that. It seems impossible to me that they wouldn't have been friends. This is why I keep saying, fuck me.
Ooh.
Oh, it's my New Jersey hands.
There's some.
All the time.
Well, it's refreshing, though.
It will be in 1 second when I go outside. Oh, yeah.
Was it on the instruments?
No, it's good, actually.
So this book, there is one note on Ben Klassen, this book about Liberty Lobby. And it mentions that Klassen had correspondence with Willis Carto, and that Willis Carto complemented his book Nature's Eternal Religion, and so on. And that occasionally it would advertise Klassen's publications in Liberty Lobby publications. But he doesn't mention any connection between Klassen and Revilo Oliver. But okay, it's not a book on Revilo Oliver.
So we're at ground zero here then.
Do you remember when the incident happened?
Oh, when I spilled all of my drink on all of me?
What you were saying?
Yeah, Fritz.
I smell like wine now. I smell like a wino. All right, man. Yuck. So,
you want to change of clothes? I'd like to see you put on something.
Maybe actually, I might do a little sink wash of this shirt in a bit. But let's just finish up with this motherfucker. I'm already sick of him. All right. So, he writes 1973 Christianity and the Survival of the West, which was by the 80s assumed to have been his last work. Historian Frank Mintz writes a book featuring Revilo Oliver very heavily and writes that was his last public work. But that book was written in 1985. So he really does slow down here in the early 80s. Well, okay, that said, he ends up publishing a collection of his essays, siege style, called America's Decline.
Okay.
So he puts out his own
Vindex is 84.
I think he's publishing other people's stuff maybe, but the Reagan election kind of fucked him up.
But wait, he has some kind of then he becomes friends with Willis Carto again, right? They reconcile.
He joins the Institute for Historical Review,
but also because that
Vindex is in Liberty Bell.
Liberty Bell.
So I think they reconcile. No?
They do. He tries also to even reconcile with William F. Buckley, and they hang out in a cabin together in the weekend in the late 60s to sort of remember that they're still friends or something. They both said it was awkward and weird. But so does everybody who hangs out with Revilo. So
maybe he reconciled with Willis Carto because they were both Yorkian, and I guess his attempt to start another Yorkian trend through National Alliance didn't really work out because William Pierce wasn't so much into it.
Yeah, that could be actually.
Yeah,
it sounds.
Well, it could also be guy never turned down a chance to get attention. Right. And this is also the first, really, the Institute for Historical Review is the first academic Nazi organization in the U.S., right? That was formed specifically to be that. So he's not he's not going to be a part of that. Yeah. He's got to do it. So Reagan's election, 1980. He's not happy at Reagan's election because Reagan's a Hollywood guy and therefore a Jew. Right. So he says when Reagan gets elected and all these right wingers are celebrating, he says,
"We ignore the fundamental question of whether our race still has the will to live or is so biologically degenerate that it will choose extinction. to be absorbed as a pollutant and pestilential mass of mindless mongrels, while the triumphant Jews keep their holy race pure and predatory.
Is what he says about Reagan getting elected.
Okay. It's time for This Is How My Race Ends.
Yes. Damn it. I've been waiting for a reason for so long. I think I just took it off in order to do this. There we go. Yes, I'm just going to knock over more things. I need a much bigger work area. All right, with stuff tied to like Velcro and stuff. Okay. Around this time, he claims that he actually left the JBS because Welch was a Jew, yada, yada. He says on it. And then he writes something called The Enemy of Our Enemies in the 80s also, which is a response to Yaki. It's more critical analysis of Imperium and the other texts that we maybe flipped through back in the Yak block. That's when he writes Aryan Asses, which is just a critique about the movement. And finally, in 1987, he is writing still for Liberty Bell, and is writing screeds against Martin Luther King Day, saying that it's a national kink day planned by Zog to kind of rub the Aryans' nose in it in America.
Kink Day?
That's what he calls it.
Is he also the originator of like using cuck a lot?
I actually don't know.
In like right-wing circles?
He doesn't die till 94. He could have snuck it in there. Yeah, he writes,
if your place of employment is to slobber over the commie kink, then the Aryan flu should keep you home.
He says he's telling everybody to boycott their workplaces that recognize Martin Luther King Day. That's how he spends his time in the 80s. And then finally in the 90s, he sort of, my understanding is that he sort of reconciles, he starts talking more about Odinism. And about how he actually is doing this already in the 60s and 70s too.
He becomes extremely anti-Christian, right?
Well, again, because he believes that Christianity started as a compatible thing with Odinism, with original so-called paganism, but then it was taken over by the Jews. So now we need to sort of move on and develop the new way, which maybe William Luther Pierce interpreted as cosmotheism later, right?
He was definitely in touch with come on.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. It's so, and then he was publishing Vindex around this time, right?
Yep. Well, it was published by Liberty Lobby by Willis Carto, I guess, but in the same volume as writings by Revilo.
He's also, also on this religious terms, when he talks about Christianity, he's also saying like now Christianity is used as an alternative to our organization for racial survival. There's a bit of Rahowa in there, that kind of thing, but I don't think he ever comes out fully Odinist or cosmotheist or whatever, Christian identity or Klassen's bullshit, creatorism, whatever.
Yes. Yeah. Creationism, or World Church of the Creator.
Sure, yeah. And then
creativity movement.
There you go. Yes.
Stupid ass.
And then finally in 94, dying of leukemia, suffering emphysema, he commits suicide, much like the original Revilo did. He kills himself in 1994 at the age of 86. And even after his death, his estate continues to publish posthumous texts, Revilo's speeches, compilations, and stuff like that. And he dies, a few months before the Oklahoma City bombing. The ultimate sort of...
only he was around to see
the fruit of his original work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he is basically responsible for the Turner Diaries.
Well, yeah, he directly...
I wasn't really, I didn't really know
that. The Turner Diaries.
Did we mention that before?
Yeah, we did.
Okay, I forgot.
But we didn't really... That was before we had a copy of the motherfucker. Like now we have it.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about reading it very soon. All right. Well, that's Revilo P. Oliver's life in a nutshell. A nut in a nutshell. And
I'm glad that we finally did a little in depth on him. He's been around for so long. It's not a super...
It's not a very interesting
remarkable life in some ways, but it is in terms of his connections. He's no Lawrence Dennis. Well, we're going to be hard pressed to find somebody more impressive than Lawrence Dennis in some ways.
Yes.
Free holy.
Especially now that we've entered the territory of people like William Luther Pierce.
That's right.
It makes sense that we mentioned him so many times, but never did an episode on him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because he's not impressive as a person, but connects a lot of things that are interesting to us.
Yeah, the reason why he was able to get his word out there wasn't because of his activities in a radical organization or something like that. It was because he was a mainstream guy, essentially, who was a Nazi. So he was a mainstream classicist. He referred to his fucking credentials all the time. He worked for the U.S. Army intelligence. You know, he had all these very like respectable mainstream titles. He was a full professor at his craziest. They were giving him a raise as he was writing Kennedy conspiracies. Like the dude had
his craziest would probably not the Kennedy conspiracy so much as
his craziest is
it
never
a
stopped
little bit later.
Really. Yeah, he kind of just continually got crazier and
basically
crazier.
writing the Turner Diaries. And
interestingly, one of the things that people say about why he killed himself was because he was afraid he was losing his mind. But I mean, that was 94.
Yeah.
It was 30 years after the CIA is a communist plot guy. I mean, that mind was lost, buddy. All right. Well, guys, we did him. He's done. He's in the pocket.
He's in the pocket.
He's trivia now. And we're going to read some of his...
trivialized his existence.
We did indeed. That's what we do here on the show. We trivialize the entire lives of Nazis. My favorite thing about it is not only knowing that I've summarized his entire stupid life onto 8 pages of notes, but that I'm going to go home and crumple them up and throw them in the trash when I'm done. I'm not even going to recycle them. And I'll tell you why. I don't want this stuff coming back into the system.
Hey.
It's a metamorphic process. These things are going to burn, baby. Until next time, I guess watch out for those commies. They're everywhere. I can give you some specific numbers. If you want to know, by 1962, already up to 50% of the government was communist. 90% of the public health department and education was communist. And by 1963, that is to say, just before Kennedy was killed, the plan was to do the full coup. The coup was going to happen in 63, and he said so in 62. And in 61, he said 62, and in 60, he said 61, but whatever. But then Kennedy died, and that proves that he was right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kennedy was going too American. Had to take him out.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very dumb.
Very dumb guy. But, you know, he never took off his little tweed suit. He kept his head down, marched along the quad as fast as he could, and tried to avoid being suckered into another telegram scheme. He stayed smart. He stayed above it, you know?
Yeah.
All right, guys.
All right.
Hey there, all you free people enjoying your free episodes from The Empire Never Ended. Maybe scoot on over to patreon.com/tenepod and become a patron. We publish 3 additional premium episodes there alongside the 2 freebies each month. We're on Twitter too, also at Tenepod, but our Patreon is really where it's at. See you there, maybe?